everyone. Welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters. With your questers, Josh and Dan. I'm Dan.
I'm Josh.
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things betrayal and
numerical.
Statistical, and numerical.
Numerical.
We're going to talk about our stats here because we're at episode 199 before the big Blue Palooza, and we're going to talk about the adventure Mists of Betrayal, the very first adventure ever launched.
This is the last episode that we are actually recording in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've already recorded the episodes with Lou, and as I said at the end of the previous episode, the one that went live today as we are recording this, the Lou episode is going to be broken up into probably 3 parts, which means that it's going to take us into the new year. So that's what we've got going on there. But yeah, we're going to talk about some statistics here, talk some numbers, talk about where we are here at the end of our 4th year of
kind of our own Spotify Wrapped
production. Yeah, well, you mentioned that. I'm going to, because we are hosted through Spotify for Podcasters, which used to be Anchor FM.
Yeah.
They actually do a Wrapped for Podcasters. You know, how everybody gets their Spotify Wrapped things that tells them what they listened to and all sorts of stuff like that. We get a whole bunch of statistics that get thrown at us from the sort of podcaster version of that. So we'll kind of go through those details as well.
Lay it on us.
So to start off, looking at our analytics, and these are all taken off of our numbers from Spotify, which does include reports sent in by other platforms. This includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, various things like that, because our stats include percentages of those.
Yeah, anywhere that you can get your podcast.
Right. Not everything, but a very significant portion. As we are recording this, it is December 6th, 2023.
Mm-hmm.
They are reporting that we have all-time 100,697 plays.
Out of 198 episodes.
Out of 198 episodes.
Yeah.
A play, by their statistics, is any time one of our episodes is streamed for at least 60 seconds or downloaded. So if it's downloaded, it counts whether somebody actually listens to it or not, I guess is what that means.
Fair.
And that's across all of the platforms that they track.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I made a post to social media when I noticed that we had broken the 100,000 mark.
Woohoo!
Which is pretty surprising.
That's roughly 505 plays per episode, but I know the older ones have more, the newer ones have less.
But average-wise, our episodes get an average of 168 plays within the first few weeks of release.
Wow.
Our audience size, which is the number of distinct devices that have either streamed at least 60 seconds of an episode or downloaded an episode within the past week, so this is just like a 7-day rolling average.
Yeah.
236. So we've got basically like 200 and a little over 200 like regular listeners on average.
Okay.
And 289 people follow us on Spotify, which means that they get notified as soon as new episodes drop. And stuff like that.
Huh. They just don't necessarily listen within the first 7 days.
Not necessarily, but yeah.
Yeah. That's the discrepancy.
It's like Spotify's equivalent of subscribing to the show.
Yeah.
Looking at some demographic info that we've got, not surprisingly, the majority of our listeners are from the US, but only 54%, so not a significant majority, but definitely a majority. Then rounding out the top 5, we've got 14% of our tracked listeners are from Germany, 7% from Canada, 6% from the UK, and 5% from Sweden. Australia comes in next at 3%, and then we've got a whole bunch of
less than 1%ers.
Poland, Norway, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, those are all like 1 or 2%. And then everything below that is less than 1%, probably like one person who listened at some point.
Yeah, in the Philippines.
Including places like Iceland, Greece, Romania, the Czech Republic, places like that here and there.
Baby, we're worldwide.
Well, I mean, we are.
I want to sing the ZZ Top song now. I'm bad. I'm nationwide.
29% of our listeners listen on Spotify. 28.9% on Apple Podcasts, so roughly equal between Spotify and Apple.
Come on, Apple, pick it up.
Yeah. 10% through Google Podcasts. Then we also have 6.8% listen through Audible, because Audible gets the podcast as well.
Yeah. Amazon can't not dip their toe in.
Yeah, and then we've got like a small handful that listen to it through independent apps like Podcast Addict or Podbean, Castbox, things like that. And then there's the sort of mysterious 4% other. Doesn't say what that is, but I don't know.
Too small.
Our most popular episode, the episode that has been listened to the most, is episode 3.
The pronunciation guide.
That's the history, geography, and linguistics episode with 1,669 plays.
Woo!
Second is introductions, episode 1, the first episode, 1,574. The surprisingly, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Not exactly in numerical order, but the top 7 episodes are the first 7 episodes.
Not surprising.
3, 1, 2, 6, 4, 5, 7. And then we jump ahead slightly because then we start getting, they're the most listened to discipline episode, Weaponsmith, 995 episodes, Wizard at 975, and Archer at 882. Those round up slots 8, 9, and 10 out of our top 10.
Tells you most people are playing Weaponsmiths, Wizards, and Archers.
Because those are you're like getting into the teens of those episodes. So they've also been around a long time. People have had a lot of opportunity to listen to them. And the other disciplines all show up pretty soon in short order further down the list.
Had a feeling. I'm curious which magic users, Wizard's highest, sorry.
Wizard is the highest. I'm kind of scanning through here real quickly and seeing if there are any that jump out in terms of listens, like notably out of order. Our enchanting episode actually is like more popular than some of the other stuff that came out even several weeks before that.
Mm-hmm.
Enchanting episode 103 beat out episode 50, which was the Empty Thrones episode that we did with Kyle.
Yeah. Sorry, Kyle.
No, that's okay. That's kind of how things go. And our episode that dropped today as we are recording this has 87 plays.
Already within 12 hours.
Well, it goes live at 1 a.m. Eastern time.
Yeah.
So that gives so it's showing up in the morning hours for Europe, and they, get a chance to listen to it. So now flipping over to our Spotify for Podcasters Wrapped.
Because this is only for the year 2023, right?
Yeah, this is only 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Top episode, we already discussed that, episode 3.
Yep.
It was streamed 268% more than your average episode during 2023. So about 3 times more than anything else.
People want to know how to pronounce this stuff.
55% of our listeners discovered us in 2023. So that means they listened to us for the first time this past year.
Wow, welcome to it.
26% of our new listeners started with episode 1.
No surprise. The continuity head in me,
which is great.
Is the same.
Not required, but it's great that they kind of take that introduction.
Yeah.
In 2023, we were streamed in 20 countries, with 31% of our total streams in the United States, which was our top country. No surprise there.
Nope.
We had the most new listeners in Germany.
No surprise there.
Your listeners have good taste, obviously.
Because they play Earth Dawn, they have good taste. Come on.
Listeners definitely told their friends about you. Podcast was shared 62% with a direct link. That may have been a bunch of me posting on social media, but also WhatsApp. I don't use that, so that's clearly was being shared 15% there, 15% other. The most shared episode was episode 1, so that's the one that people would presumably send to each other to say, hey, here's
Listen
the show.
to these guys.
This says our podcast rating was 4.8. I don't know quite what that means.
Nope.
Plus 1% increase in listeners, plus 35% increase in streams, and a plus 36% increase in followers. Those are good numbers.
Yeah, we'll take those.
We are a top 10 podcast for 163 fans.
Nice.
We are a top 5 podcast for 134 fans. And drum roll, you are the number 1 podcast for 79 fans, which means that 79 people listen to us the most out of all of their podcasts. Now, it could be that we're the only one, but that's fine.
So each of you 79 listeners get 1,000 legend points right off the bat.
Top fans listen to you 3.5 times more than your other listeners. So our top fans, probably going back and listening again, as people have said.
Yeah, they need Josh's clarification as how he actually said this. Yes. Prove it to the Game Master. Josh says this. Play it for him.
So, yeah, some good numbers there. Mm-hmm. What was that other stat that we were talking about before we hit record, Dan? You've got that pulled up.
The listen notes score is still 30. And what that means is a metric that shows the estimated popularity of this podcast compared to other RSS-based public podcasts in the world on a scale of 0 to 100. The higher, the more popular, calculated from first and third-party data, updated monthly. So this podcast is one of the top 5% most popular shows out of 3.2 million plus globally.
So, yeah, that's good. Now, in fairness, there are a lot of podcasts that put stuff out and just put out a couple of episodes and they vanish.
And they fold, yeah.
Because keeping a podcast regularly going and releasing is actually work.
You're telling me. No, I'm kidding.
We're still here 4 years later, and the fact that we have only occasionally missed releases of some sort is pretty good. Like, that in and of itself is automatically going to put you in a rarefied strata of podcasting.
When we looked at that like a year and a half ago, we were only like 20 or 25 listen scores. We've gone up to 30. We've stayed at 30 for at least the last year.
I'm sorry. Are higher numbers good on that?
Yes.
Larger numbers are good. Okay.
Yes. So the closer you get to 100, the better off you are. We're only at 30. But then,
Gotcha.
People like Kevin Smith's podcast, he's in the top 1%. He's like, 65 or 90 or I don't even know. I haven't even looked. You good.
Still, like being 30, that puts us in the top 5%.
Yes.
It's kind of like
we're also a niche genre of podcast. So.
And that's fine, but it's cool. I like it. We've been doing this.
I'm happy. We're good.
Actually, while I'm here, let me pull up. As of a couple of weeks ago, all of our old episodes have been exported and updated to YouTube. So those numbers that we're talking about don't include those figures at all.
Right.
So our YouTube channel has everything except the newest episode available.
Yeah. Because
the podcast episode drops Wednesdays. I don't release the YouTube version of that until Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I would do is the old episodes Monday and Wednesday, new episode Friday. As I kind of worked through the backlog and kept the new ones coming out. Now that the archive is fully up there, I may shift to having the YouTube version go live on Wednesday as well, so that I can do all of that post-production and uploading them all at the same time. I don't know, maybe start doing that in the new year once the Lou episodes are up.
Yeah, fair.
But let's look at some analytics from YouTube. In the last 28 days, our channel got 276 views, which is respectable. 60.8 total watch hours, plus 4 subscribers. That's in the past 28 days. We currently have 106 subscribers total.
Yay. Last time I looked, we had 5.
Yeah. We had 124 unique viewers, 33 returning viewers. So that's good. I'm trying to see. Our most popular episode on YouTube is episode 1.
Fair.
With episode 3 coming in second.
Nice.
Episode 1 has 214 views and episode 3 has 110. So our individual view numbers for the YouTube versions are a lot
different,
lower, partly because they have not been up as long.
I was gonna say, that's a newer format for us.
It took about a little over a year to get everything updated.
Yes.
The first episode dropped August of 2022, so a little bit over
16 months.
Yeah, 16 months, give or take. But anyway, that's good. Making it available there. There's no, aside from a couple of times, there's not really any video to watch, so it is just as easy to put it on and listen to it that way without needing to necessarily pay attention to it.
Absolutely. We only have like 2 video episodes anyway.
That's where we are. We appreciate everybody sticking with us. We're going to keep doing this for a little bit.
Yeah. Mine deep.
We're starting to mine deep. Yeah, we're getting into published adventures we're going to get into here. We're going to shift into, once we complete the Renels of the Bloodwood, we're going to shift into looking at Shosara and Seriatha.
Mm-hmm.
Probably go through the Basgothia book.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about some of the other Theran provinces from that first edition book. We've got some stuff to go to.
And then if anything new comes out.
Yeah. There will come a point where we're sort of done.
Yeah, fair.
I'm not exactly sure when that will be. I would suspect, based at the rate that we're doing stuff, that maybe, a year or two.
Mm-hmm. Ish.
This is sort of the thing, like, we didn't think that we would come this far.
I didn't know how we were going to get past 50 episodes, much less 100, much less 150, much less 200.
200, yeah. We're still having a good time doing this.
Absolutely.
Appreciate y'all sticking around with us, and there will come a point where we may have to figure out what we're going to move on to.
Yeah, we'll have to
as
tap
like
out
a
of this
new
eventually.
project for us to fill our Wednesdays with.
Just calling Josh is going to fill my Wednesday out. Yeah. That's about it. Whether we record it for the rest of you is a different story.
But anyway, that'll do nicely, and we wish everybody a safe and pleasant and relaxing holiday season, whatever holiday it is, or no holiday that you may choose to celebrate here as we wrap up 2023 and go into 2024. It's been a weird few years, man.
No doubt.
So anyway, yeah, that's that.
Fair. So enough tooting our own horn for episode 199. We'll just wrap this up, put a bow on it, and send it on its way. Kidding. We're going to talk about Mist of Betrayal next. So no more self-horn tooting.
Toot.
For the rest of the episode. So we're going to talk about the first edition Mist of Betrayal adventure, which I happened to pull off the shelf. Josh pulled his own copy off the shelf as well. Still a very sturdy book. This is 102 pages, 101 pages. Because 102 is an ad. 101 pages of absolute wonderful adventure. I couldn't ask for anything more for this one. So I'm going to go through the plot points. Just basically, these events are going to happen in the story. Josh is going to talk about all kinds of things that he noticed going through it. First thoughts.
Well, first thoughts, I have talked, I know you've sort of talked as well on the show in the past about Mist of Betrayal and how there are some issues with it, especially in the first edition incarnation.
Yeah, fair.
In part because, if I'm recalling correctly, it was developed sort of in tandem with the core rules.
Yeah.
And it was very early in the process.
Yeah.
While some playtesting and stuff had been done of the game, the balance issues, like understanding how challenges worked, and while broadly from a mathematical standpoint you can kind of get a sense of it, was not quite as nicely tuned as later adventures would be.
Yeah.
This is suggested, according to the back, an Earth Dawn adventure recommended for 6 to 8 characters of any discipline who have reached circles 1 through 3.
Yeah.
It is very rough going for Circle 1 characters.
Yeah.
For reasons that we will discuss when we get into specific things a little bit later. But even for like Circle 3 characters, it can be a little bit tough. Going with a larger group does mitigate some of the issues, but not all of them. Again, we'll get into specifics when we get into later things.
Yeah.
But there's also the framework. We're going to go through the overall plot. So, spoilers, by the way.
For a 30-year-old adventure.
But just in case, I know that there are people who run games pre-war, people who like running games with these old classic adventures.
That's apparently become all the rage right now in D&D, is to republish all the old classic adventures and run those anew. So
because there are people that are just finding the game now, they are going back and finding, because they're available in PDF, these old adventures and wanting to give them a try, or people who had been playing the game for a while but maybe have a new group that they're introducing and want to go through some of these classic things. That's all fine.
Yeah.
Just be warned, we're going to be talking spoilers ahoy.
Plenty.
If you think you might be playing this adventure, you may want to skip this one.
Yeah.
Obviously, the dice will do what they do, so it doesn't necessarily mean that you will be able to waltz through this easily.
No.
But definitely things to keep in mind. But the plot structure, the suggested sort of breakdown is for this overall adventure to take place over 4 sessions.
Whether you can pull that off is a different story.
Yeah, well, a lot of that will depend on how individual scenes and stuff go.
Yeah. I just know running 8 characters takes longer than running 6.
Yeah. And there's also, I think, what they have in here as the 3rd session could very easily end up taking like 2 sessions or possibly even 3.
Yeah.
Depending on how things go. But this is supposed to be like a pretty significant storyline. This is not a one-shot by any stretch of the imagination.
No, this is 100 pages of 8.5 by 11 paper. This is a big adventure. Absolutely so. Basically, where the whole thing starts, I mean, they kind of drop you in quick. You, as the party of adventurers, you arrive in a town called Tureem, and you are instantly beset upon by 2 jehuthras. Well, I can't say not like Star Wars where you just jump into the action. You arrive in the village, town, and then eventually within a few short beats of getting into the town, you're beset upon by 2 jehuthras. So right off the bat, pretty quick in, you get your character introductions, maybe a little wandering, a little setting description going on, little flavor text. Bam, jehuthra.
This sort of initial encounter, the village and the jehuthra, is a very straightforward kind of introductory encounter.
Yeah.
You've got this little village that you come across. They're having a problem and you need to go deal with it. And that deal is 2 jehuthra. Now, jehuthra in 1st edition, their numbers aren't quite as high as they are in 4th. There was some rebalancing of sorts that happened with 4th edition, partially because of what came out of 3rd and the work there.
Yeah.
Jehuthras are not quite as formidable a foe, thinking, oh my gosh, you're throwing those up against 1st, 2nd, 3rd circle adepts. They still are tough.
Yeah,
and 2 of them especially. The biggest potential pitfall with this encounter is the fact that their iron web power allows them to split the group up.
Yes.
Largely, each character is going to end up isolated, in most cases, in their own pathway in the web, which makes them potentially fodder for the jehuthra. 2 of them, remember. Each of them will go scampering down a different pathway, and depending on which adept they go after, squishy magicians, troubadours, or anything like that, could have a very difficult time. The jehuthra do have 2 attacks, physical attacks per round, at an attack step of 13 with a damage step of 11. That damage step is about equivalent to what a martial character with a broadsword is likely to have.
Yeah.
A strength step of 6 with a broadsword puts you at a step 11 damage.
Yeah.
But a step 13 attack is pretty impressive. One of the things that happens with 1st edition is that defense ratings do not climb quite as quickly as they do in later editions.
Yeah.
When you're rolling a step, the average result, that is, about half the time you're going to be rolling the step number or higher, and an attack step of 13, especially against characters that may have lower physical defenses, like magicians or troubadours, are
scouts,
gonna potentially run into problems with that. I mean, physical defenses of 7 or 8 are gonna get hit pretty frequently.
Yeah.
And again, in 1st edition, you've got that extra, that excellent success, that armor defeating hit, which just completely disregards any armor that they might have. And again, as lower circle characters, they are not particularly likely to have much in the way of heavy protection.
No.
In fact, the only characters that might have thread items would be the magicians, because other disciplines don't get their thread weaving until 4th circle in 1st edition. So this is an introductory encounter, the first encounter in this adventure, sort of scripted as a kind of introductory scenario, could potentially cause a lot of problems for the group with characters potentially being seriously injured or possibly even getting killed.
Yes.
Again, very flavorful, fantastic, introduces a unique Earth Dawn iconic creature, it's
a horror construct, so
is rough.
You could knock it down to 1 if your party's not that adept, or
that would be one thing that you could do to balance it. The suggestions here in the troubleshooting section: 1 or more characters might die fighting the Jehuthras. The game master should keep careful track of how much damage each character takes and try to manage it so that none of the characters suffer fatal wounds. The game master may have to fudge the amount of damage done to a character, or choose not to have the Jehuthra attack a character who has taken a level of damage too near their unconsciousness or death rating.
Yeah.
And then, of course, after defeating the Jehuthra, the initial MacGuffin that drives the plot forward is the recovery of a magical amulet.
Yeah.
And the characters learn that there is a wizard in Haven, which is on the edge of Parlainth, not too far away, who would be able to tell them stuff about this item that they found, this magical relic.
He could, because he's a wizard and he can unlock the mysteries with item history.
Except that in 1st edition, wizards didn't get item history.
Exactly. Plot thread hole.
But there were other ways that were sort of developed later that that sort of thing could be discovered.
Mm-hmm.
That's the initial encounter.
Yeah.
A little bit of a combat puzzle, a small village that you could maybe have a little bit of role playing in, because there are some locations that are detailed, but potentially a tough encounter, especially if you are looking at this as maybe the first adventure that a group is running.
Yeah.
A new Earth Dawn game master who doesn't maybe have a feel yet for how the system works. That initial encounter could go very badly and leave a rough impression on the group, especially with the way that dice in Earth Dawn can go.
Oh,
you get unfortunate explosions, or the player characters are not rolling particularly well. That fight can go a lot tougher than perhaps it needs to be. Fortunately, the Jehuthra are not super tough. They've got a physical in 1st edition. Again, I'm not going to preface in 1st edition unless it's specifically needed.
Yeah.
Physical defensive 9, that's not bad. Martial characters, even at 1st circle, you're probably looking at around a
7
8, 9, or 10 for your steps. So it's going to be tough, but not impossible. They do have 8 physical armor, so it's a little bit tough to get through that, but a good explosion on an armor defeating hit completely ignores that and gets through.
Yeah.
They do have a spell defense of 13, which means that it's probably going to be tough for any magicians to deal with them or do anything noteworthy. And they've got actually a decent social defense, so battle shout or other debuff attempt things might do well on them. A swordmaster with taunt could keep one tied up, provide penalties to make it easier for people to deal with.
Well, and if you're using the 4th edition stats and you're using the 4th edition mechanics, then your exploding dice and your extra successes might make this go a little quicker, wouldn't it?
But that would be the same in 1st edition as well.
Yeah.
Your dice are going to be exploding about the same amount. It's just the difference is that in 1st edition, the exploding dice and armor defeating hits are all or nothing.
Yes.
If I recall correctly, if you end up with an 18 or better on your attack roll, then that's against a 9. That's an armor defeating hit.
Yeah.
And so that would completely ignore all 8 points of armor.
Yep.
What's probably going to happen is what happens in a lot of early circle fights against a roughly equivalent opponent. And that is that there will be some bits and scratches as maybe a hit gets a couple of points through your armor, and then somebody will get a really good hit that will deal a big chunk of damage, possibly causing a wound. There's that kind of slow grind, and then with a big This encounter is probably dealt with very nicely if you've got a wizard in the group that has Dispel Magic, because the wizard can dispel the iron web.
Yeah.
Get the group back together. I think a group of 6 or 7 characters ganging up on 1 or 2 jehuthra will probably handle that a lot better than isolating them all into their own passageways from the web problem.
Exactly. Yeah. Without problem. So basically what you have to do is you take so I also figure if it's not enough reason to get the amulet to go see Hireman in Haven, then if somebody is wounded, then they need to go see, the Healers of Garland. Put them in Haven as well. Why not? Make it a twofer. Kind of massage the plot however you need to massage the plot to get them to go where you want them to go.
So Haven is a larger community. It has more resources that they would be able to draw on for whatever reason.
Yep.
There's no real reason that they are in this area other than this is where you are kind of thing as an introductory
We're starting here.
Adventure.
That's all there is to it.
It's not even like you're heading to Haven and this is a place that you stop by on the way there.
No. We're shoehorning you on purpose. Here you are. So in exchange for delivering something to the Bloodwood, specifically to the Blood Warder Takaris, which you can find in the Elven Nations book, 4th edition, he is in there, Hireman will do all of the amulets investigation for you. And so, go ahead.
Yeah, there are a couple of locations that are described in Haven that end up getting sort of shoehorned in later on to what is referred to as the Old Town.
Yeah.
When the Parlanthe book comes out, to kind of keep some continuity and saying, oh yeah, these places that were in Mists of Betrayal are here as well, but they're not really the focus of Haven as a community for that box set, which is fine. A shop, a forge, and Hierman lives above the forge. There's just a couple of locations like that and some NPCs. But yeah, that's the exchange. You go to Hierman and he's like, oh yeah, I can study this for you, but I have a task that you can do for me in exchange for this information. And that is take this package to
the
Bloodwood, which is a several days journey to the west of Parlanthe.
Exactly. So what you don't know until you get there is that you're delivering the ever-living flower.
Yes.
Which is kind of an important thing. Anyway, that's not here or there. It's a plot point. You don't really need to know anything else about the ever-living flower. Move on. However, wrinkle in the adventure already, and this is why I like this one, because it adds all kinds of complexities to your adventure. You are being followed by Theran spies who want to know what is being transported. And they hire highwaymen to attack you. So second combat encounter. Based upon the wrinkle of, we want to know what you're transporting. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. The highwayman attack is a much easier encounter in a way than the Jehuthras.
Yeah. You're not fighting a horror construct.
The highwaymen are non-adept characters. They've got physical and spell defense of 6. They've got just 1 attack at a step 5.
Yeah.
Attacks with short swords and bows. They've got very little armor. There are more of them. There's supposed to be 1 per player character, but a group of adepts should be able to handle them without too much difficulty.
Yes.
The Theran agent that is leading them is a second circle adept, but he prefers not to get directly involved and will retreat if things do not go well so that he can try again later.
Yeah. I like the combats being, the first one's tougher, so you think you're all that, huh? Let's see how you do against a Jehuthra. And then the second combat is, okay, you learned from the first adventure that you're not all that. The second combat, okay, maybe you are better against a human group or human-like group in there as well. So upon reaching the Bloodwood, you are not met by Takaris. You are met by his enemy, Kalurin.
Before we even get to the Bloodwood, there is a second ambush.
Oh, right.
That happens in the Midland Trading Post, which is about halfway between Parlanthe and the Bloodwood.
Yeah.
Where basically the group stays there for the night and the place gets attacked at night by some slightly more difficult opponents, some orc raiders.
Yeah.
Also hired by the same Theran agents. Again, trying to take the character's stuff, take the package that it is that they are transporting. This encounter has the wrinkle of that the characters are likely to be asleep and not armored at the time, which does make it a little bit of a more difficult fight. And there are 8 orcs, but they are not necessarily the only people that are there, so some strings might be pulled to have people come to aid in the last moment to keep people from dying. There is also a kind of adventure hook sidebar that they come across also on the road. This has a lot of like road encounters.
Yeah.
There's the ruined caravan that was the victim of a horror, which doesn't have anything at all to do with anything else that is going on in this adventure.
Yeah.
It is just a thing that they come across, evidence of the type of destruction that a horror can wreak. That horror is given stats in this book.
Yep.
Duaga, and if the player characters decide to follow the trail of this nasty thing, they are likely to die.
Yeah. You're not ready to face that yet.
We're going to talk about the difficulty of the horror that is the primary antagonist in this adventure eventually.
Yeah, but we'll get there.
We'll get there. But Duaga, the horror that killed the caravan, is even more powerful than the mist. Not significantly so, but enough.
Yeah, just enough.
Especially with its couple of its powers that it's got.
Yeah.
Here's a hook if you want to introduce this and have this as a thing later on. This is, again, very early Earth Dawn, a lot of horrors being the theme and focus of adventures, even superficially. Like in this, you've got 2 horrors plus the jehuthra, which are horror constructs. There's a lot of this sort of dark horror fantasy that's going on that is not quite the case so much with some of the later adventures that we'll be talking about.
Agreed.
Then we get to the Bloodwood.
So like I said, you're not actually met by the person you're supposed to give this to Takaris. You're met by his rival, Kaloran. And Kaloran is working with a Theran slaver and a horror.
Which is, of course, not revealed at this point in the adventure.
No. But that's for the game master to know, to have it in the background somewhere. You eventually do get to meet Takaris and hand over the ever-living flower. And he asks you for another favor to find the Theran slaver, Fegus Kull, somewhere in the Bloodwood.
Well, on the outskirts of the Bloodwood, yeah.
Yeah. And Fegus Kull is guarded by elves wearing Kaloran's sigil. So tracking him to a cursed village of Akarem in its ruined care. And everyone in Akarem is corrupted by the horror known as the Mist.
Right. Which, again, are details that we're not aware of at this point in the process.
Not at all.
But it is the meeting with Takaris and getting this sort of the next step in this path of adventure. The payment that is supposed to be taken back to Hierman is not ready. And so, hey, while you're waiting, you might as well go and do this thing for me. Exactly. And I can give you the other thing and you can take that back.
Yeah.
We've been talking about the elves. This is a case where Takaris is using the player characters as agents to move against one of his rivals that he doesn't want to necessarily move against openly. Yes. He wants them to perhaps find evidence for him to use against his rival. There's like sort of behind the scenes political stuff going on that the player characters are never really fully aware of.
No.
There's, I think, in a way, still a little bit of Shadowrun adventure design influence here, where the player characters are kind of tasked with doing stuff and not necessarily understanding everything that's going on. That's sort of like the first half is getting up to this point, getting this task, and then going after the slavers.
Yeah. I mean, it's well designed from the Blood Elf perspective of, this is a political intrigue. You're my pawn. You don't get to know until maybe I have to tell you.
You brought this really valuable artifact back that is going to earn me points with the queen.
Yep.
Also, since you're here, maybe I can use you to weaken one of my rivals.
Yep. And not have it come back to me specifically.
And not necessarily have it come back to me. And then we have the slaver band, Fagus Cool and his slavers.
Oh, yeah.
Who have a bunch of slaves that they have captured. It should be fairly clear, even to a more experienced group of the size that is recommended for this, that attacking the slave caravan is probably not the wisest move to make.
Yeah, logistics don't back you up on that one.
There are a total of 24 slavers, a mix of orcs, humans, and trolls. None of whom individually are particularly tough. Like, they're all non-adepts. They're all defense ratings in the 6 to 8 range.
Yeah.
They do have a little bit more armor. They're a little bit tougher than the highwaymen were earlier on, but there are a lot of them, outnumbering the group likely 3 or 4 to 1, which will make it very, very difficult for the group to actually take them on.
Doesn't mean my group didn't try.
Fortunately, because they are slavers, they would not be interested in killing the characters. They would basically be interested in knocking them out and throwing them in their slave cages and taking them where they're taking everybody else.
Yeah. Because it's designed at this point in the overall Mist of Betrayal adventure that the player characters are captured. They therefore need to escape and need to destroy the horror before they can actually get out of the village, because there's something about the village where they can't necessarily leave.
Right. Either they are captured and dropped off in the village, or they follow the slave caravan to the village with the hope of rescuing perhaps the slaves. The caravan drops the slaves off there because the slaves are a gift to the horror. And then the caravan leaves, but you can't leave the environs of the village and the care unless the horror lets you.
Yeah.
And so there's this sort of hand-wavium where if the characters get captured, when they get dumped off, their equipment gets dumped off with them.
Yeah.
Because the slavers are like, well, what are you going to do? Come after us? You can't leave once you're here.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hand-wavy in that regard. But then we get the village with its residents. And the village itself is sort of wrapped in this fog.
Yeah.
Where if you try to leave, you kind of vanish into the mist and show back up, without realizing it, you sort of get turned around and walk right back into the village.
Yeah.
And also all of the villagers force the hand at that point, where if for whatever reason the player characters do not venture into the care, the villagers kind of force them to. And even if the player characters kill the villagers in self-defense, because the villagers are like, we're sorry, we have to do this, because they kind of know what's up as well to a certain extent, and they can't really talk about it. But even if they get killed, the horror can bring them back to life.
Yes.
And so then we get into sort of the bulk of the exploration of the care, which is sort of the remains of the upper citadel and the remains of sort of the underground area. And there are a lot of encounters. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. You've got a bunch of krill worms. You've got some shadowmants. Down in the catacombs, you've got ghouls and cadaver men. But there are 2 big, difficult encounters that I want to talk about. And anybody who's familiar with this adventure knows what I'm talking about. The ultimate goal is to figure out the curse that is affecting the village and how to break it so that the player characters can leave.
Yes.
And return to the Bloodwood with evidence of Koloran's perfidy.
Yeah.
But there are sort of 2 pieces to that. One, in order to break the curse, there is a specific thing that you need to do. And the only way to really learn that, the way the adventure is written, is by dealing with the spectral dancer that is in the tower.
Yes.
The spectral dancer is a very tough opponent.
Agreed.
It feels to a certain extent like the spectral dancer was created in this adventure and then they put it in the
creatures
rulebook rather than vice versa. I could be wrong. That actually was a question that we should have asked Lou.
Right. Next time.
Maybe he will post when he hears this episode, go up to talk about that.
Yeah.
The Spectral Dancer has a physical defense of 20.
Yeah.
Low circle characters are not going to be able to affect her physically. She doesn't have any armor, but you need to beat a 20 in order to do any physical damage. Spell defense of 15. Spells aren't going to be affecting her very much.
Not by much.
With 8 mystic armor, mystic spells aren't really going to be doing much at all.
No.
And a social defense of 12. She's also got a death rating of 90 and is immune to knockdown or immune to unconsciousness.
Yes.
Actually defeating her in combat is not something that is going to happen.
That's a fool's errand. Yes.
At this power level, yeah. Her attacks are 1 spell at a spellcasting step of 20 with an effect of 23.
Ooh.
They're going to wreck a group really quickly if you take that approach. Yeah. It's generally set up really obviously, I think, that the idea is that you need to do what you should do with Spectral Dancers, which is try and connect with them
socially,
emotionally,
yes, through
social charisma or some other appropriate skill in order to break through their cursed undead state, and sort of assuage their pain.
Because they should look like a ghost, so you really should describe it well enough that your party gets the idea that it's a ghost.
Yeah. But in order to successfully do that, you need an excellent success against their social defensive. Is it excellent or extraordinary? Now I can't remember.
Usually excellent. 9 times out of 10.
No, it's extraordinary success.
Oh, wow.
Against the social defense. Now, fortunately, for every lesser success that you get, you get to add 1 to your next test.
Yeah.
You can accumulate enough bonuses over time, presumably, to get that extraordinary success. The drawback is that you take damage each round that you are dancing. You take step damage equal to the number of rounds that you have been dancing. So that increases over time, and armor doesn't reduce that amount. That is very difficult. If you manage to get through that, then Sheena, I think is her name, I don't have the book open now anymore, will basically tell you, here's what's going on. There is a horror that has cursed this place. You need to defeat the horror, take what is left behind when you do that, put it on the altar, say the village's name, and that will break the curse, and you'll be able to leave. And she also sort of tells you that the horror lives down in the catacombs. Fantastic.
Yes.
Then you get to the horror. Now, understanding that if you are not careful, your group has had other encounters.
Yeah.
The Spectral Dancer, the Shadowmance, the Krillworms, the Ghouls, the Cadaver Men. There are multiple things that they could have encountered. Yeah. There is not necessarily any specific time pressure involved here. So if the group does get kind of badly beaten up, they can retreat, rest up, heal, and venture back in. But I suspect that the player characters are likely to feel like there is some sort of time pressure.
Yeah.
But then you get the horror itself, the Mist, a nasty opponent as well.
Yes.
Physical defense of 15 is very difficult to damage it physically. Keep in mind that even a third circle melee or combat-focused character, you're looking at likely a step 7 for their dexterity, like their attribute step, a 3 or a 4 maybe on their talent rank, even if you're looking at like a third or fourth, third circle character, 3 or 4 maybe. So you're looking at a 10 or 11.
Yeah.
Against a 15 is not going to hit very frequently. You're going to be relying on karma for physical attacks to hit.
You're going to sap your karma pretty
Fortunately,
quick.
its spell defense is only a 7.
Yeah.
So spells actually are pretty effective against it. Although it does have a physical armor of 15.
You're going to be there all day.
And a mystic armor of 7.
Yeah.
So dealing damage to it is going to be difficult. It's got a death rating of 58. There's not a lot of damage that you need to do to it, but it's going to be difficult to get that damage through.
The 15, yeah.
Meanwhile, it has 2 attacks per round at a step 18 attack with a step 20 damage for physical, not to mention half a dozen spells that it has as well. None of which are particularly damaging. Like it's got Air Blast and Ice Spear is probably its nastiest spell. It's got Puddle Deep, it's got Metal Scream, like it's got some sort of debuff style environmental control type spells. When you defeat it, it leaves like this little crystal behind. You put the crystal on the altar. You speak the name of the town, that breaks the curse, and you can leave. You head back to the Bloodwood, you get the package of blood ivy that was promised to Hierman. You find out that Kaloran has fled. He's gone. Nobody knows kind of what's happened to him. And you take the trip back with a sort of semi-optional encounter of dealing with some orc scorchers along the way.
Because why not?
Because why not? It's a several days journey. Here's maybe something as like a little bit of a break. Yeah. You get back to Haven to discover that Kaloran has gotten there ahead of you, because Kaloran realized what had happened as soon as the horror was defeated, as soon as the curse was broken, and he fled because of that, because he knew that his game was up. He has fled to Parlainth because he knows that's where the group is headed to kind of exact his revenge on them. And he shows up with a couple of Theran agents, attacks the group when they show up to Hierman.
Yeah.
He is a tough character a little bit as well. He is not as powerful as an actual Blood Warder is likely to be.
No.
He is only a 5th Circle Nethermancer in these stats, but he is a little bit of a challenge, especially where he's got a couple of other folks with him. His defenses aren't particularly great, but he's got Wither Limb as one of the spells that he knows, for example.
That was fun.
Fog Ghost.
Oh, love that one.
Fog of Fear.
Oh, love that one too.
Shield Mist. He's only got 2 matrices, but he's also got Will Force.
Yeah.
Because he's a 5th Circle Nethermancer. He can keep people from getting into close combat with him. He can cause a lot of problems for a group. Fortunately, during the fight, the horror is able to reform itself and manifest, killing Kaloran in the process, which is, I guess, good in one way, because you no longer have to deal with the 5th Circle Nethermancer, but then you need to deal with the Mist all over again.
Yes, because now it's Duaga in full form.
This is the Mist again.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It is the Mist again in full form, same stat block, fight it all over again. The one advantage that you have is that Kaloran's death snaps Hierman out of the trance that he had been put in, and he helps out by casting Counterspell on the group. Yeah. And he's a pretty decent wizard, assuming that he successfully casts it, which is he probably will, boosts everybody's mystic defense, social spell defense, because Counterspell replaces your social defense in 1st edition. The final fight is one big final knockdown drag out against the horror. But again, as tough as the fight was previously, the one advantage is that you've had several days of travel and you're probably all healed up and replenished in terms of your karma pools and
wounds and all that.
Making the fight, and with a little bit of help from Hierman, maybe the fight will be a little bit easier. But that's generally it. Yeah. It's a solid adventure, an interesting story, plays in a lot of good, iconic Earth Dawn type stuff, but does have 4 encounters that could be very difficult.
Yes.
Depending on the group. Definitely lower circle characters are going to have an even harder time with it, because you've got the Jehuthras, we talked about them being tough. The Spectral Dancer, potentially be a tough fight, especially if you, for whatever reason, have a group that doesn't really have any strong charisma characters. And then you've got the horror itself.
Twice.
The Mist is a very difficult opponent either time that you face it. Its weakness is the fact that it's actually kind of susceptible to spells, mystic spells in general, because its physical armor is so high. Admittedly, with a spell defense of 7, armor defeating hits work the exact same way. Yeah. So a 13 or whatever, I think, or 15
something like close to that,
defeats its armor mystically and completely ignores the armor.
Yeah.
So that's Mists of Betrayal. A couple of tough spots, but an interesting story, iconic, and I think suffers from tough parts about the way the math works.
Fair.
Inexperienced Earth Dawn GM could very well find a party wipe or very near to it at multiple points along the path. There are a few places where the troubleshooting is try not to kill people. Here's how you can avoid killing people.
Exactly. The only thing you missed for a plot point is that since you do come back to the Bloodwood and you bring proof of Kaloran's alliance with the horror and the slaver, you get to meet the Queen. Tikaris grants you access to the audience with the Queen. That's a fun role-playing. Yeah.
Yeah, for having delivered the flower. And the queen, in fact, gives you a rose that grants you permission to enter the wood.
Safe passage.
For a year, or a year and a day.
Always.
But then, with that main story having wrapped up, there are some loose ends. Fagus Kull and his slaver band are still likely in operation. There's Duaga, the horror that ransacked and destroyed the caravan. Yeah. But again, that's something where the group would likely want to be a little bit more powerful before taking that thing on. But yeah, there are like a couple of interesting hooks and a little bit of fascinating lore-connected things.
Well, and you've been to 3 locations now. You've now been to Haven twice, started there, ended there. So now you can explore Haven a little bit and all the other characters involved in that, because now the part-length box set is out. You've been to the Midland Trading Post. There's actually an adventure later on, Woodland Whispers, I believe, written in 3rd edition, that expands upon the Midland Trading Post. And now you've been to the Bloodwood, and you've got safe passage, free passage for a year and a day, and the Bloodwood sourcebook is out. So,
and the Bloodwood is a very iconic Earthdawn location. Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about how difficult it is to sort of have groups get involved with the Bloodwood. Mm-hmm. And this is like a sort of a nice way to do it. I think this was, again, early enough that while the Bloodwood was isolationist or closed off, I don't think that the idea was solid enough at this point exactly how tough it would be.
Yeah, it was still in the beginning concept stages of...
I mean, you still have the Thornmen and the defenses that basically intercept anybody that is trying to come in. It's a nice adventure. If you are looking to run it, you might want to grab the 3rd edition update of it in the Red Brick Adventure Compendium.
Oh, wow.
Well, I know there was a classic. There might have been a 3rd edition version where they kind of updated the stats for it.
Okay.
Which kind of rebalances things a little bit in terms of what the recommended circles are and things like that. Yeah. But yeah, what you would want to do is really take a look at the numbers compared to your group and see where things fall and how difficult encounters might be.
Understood. So, because this adventure begins with you finding an amulet and ends with maybe you getting a couple of key knowledges, and there's a few more things you can gather up along the way, because I think there's 2 amulets and a headband and maybe a sword and all kinds of things. What do you think about the magic items they introduced? Because you have the Amulet of Dirac Tolamara, you've got... where did they go? There it is.
The amulet is pretty cool. Yeah. It provides some armor bonus, some physical armor and mystic armor. At higher ranks, it provides both the effect of a healing potion or a last chance potion. Yeah. Then at its top rank, it also allows the equivalent effect of a desperate blow or desperate spell charm without the blood magic. It just costs strain.
Yeah. I've got a player whose character is still running around with this thing. The headband.
The headband is only found in the lair of Duaga. That's something that may show up later. I don't really have any thoughts on that.
Nobody found that when I ran this twice. Nobody found it both times. So, it's still yet to be found.
I have a problem with its rank 4 power. Its top power allows the wearer to detect the influence of a horror. Ooh. It's a perception test against the spell defense of either the target or the horror, whichever is higher. So it's not likely something that's likely to work.
Yeah, because the horror spell defense can be way up there.
But it is something that just strikes me... I don't know. It depends on... We can talk about that another time. That's actually a topic for us to discuss, perhaps.
Fair.
Is one of the sliders on the ability to, or ease of detecting...
Horror influence.
Yeah,
fair.
And then there is...
The Staff of Akarem, the Mage Builder.
The Staff of Akarem, the Mage Builder, after whom the village is named, is great for a magician, adds bonuses to spellcasting. If used as a weapon, it is a +6 step bonus to the wielder's strength. It adds a bonus to perception for detecting secret doors, magical traps, and unsafe areas. It increases spell defense when resisting elemental attacks. And at the top rank allows the wielder to summon an earth elemental.
And there's stats.
And there is a stat block for it, and the Earth Elemental is actually pretty decent.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some rumors. Yeah, so...
I mean, not bad. You get 3 magic items possible here to start your career with. And obviously Hireman can help you out with all of those. A little hand waving from the Game Master, because in first edition, as you said, they don't get item history, but now they do. So they can help out with that a little bit. So I have run this thing twice.
You're looking at quite a bit of Legend Award as well.
Yeah.
Just from creatures and opponents, there's like 1,100 Legend that each character would get.
Encounters.
Well, those are the encounters, but the various session goals and story goals. And this actually provides an example. We've talked about the role-playing Legend Award stuff. This actually does provide role-playing / heroics suggestions. Yeah. If they do these, they get these additional Legend Awards. I
mean, don't tell them they need to get them, but see if they do them on their own.
Right.
Anyway.
There is enough Legend that is acquired over the course of the 4 sessions in this to get first circle characters, certainly into second, possibly
into third.
Near third, if not into third, depending on how they spend their points. It's good adventure that has some weaknesses. It has some stuff that is in there that I think is good in terms of helping set the tone and fleshing out the world. Like the loose ends kind of stuff, like the whole thing with Duaga, not related to anything at all. It's just another horror that's in the area that's causing problems. There's Vegas Cole and the Slavers. Like, again, that's a sort of Theran, the slavery, like an early focus theme of the game. And while the Therans throughout first edition tend to be an antagonist faction, the slavery aspect of it doesn't tend to be quite as in your face unless you're down in Sky Point and Vivain.
Yeah.
I like it. It's good. I've run it a couple of times. My favorite sort of memory of running that was I ran it once, and when the Midland Trading Post got attacked on their trip out there, the Dwarf Swordmaster didn't bother like even getting dressed, just grabbed his sword and ran out and was like basically fighting in just his...
Skivvies?
Yeah, just his skivvies. Yeah, no, it was good.
No, my favorite one was, as I said, the slavers showed up, and then my party decided to try and attack them because that's who they were. I had a party of a lot of orcs, and the orc elementalist, got his fire spell going, or something along those lines. A fire happened, and the pyromaniac decided not to try and put it out because he didn't have the snuff spell, so he couldn't put it out. So, I had the caravan of slaves was actually in 3 different little wagons, all tied together like a train, and the rear wagon actually is what ended up with all the smoke blowing into it. And so they didn't get to that one in time. Those slaves didn't make it. They all died of smoke inhalation. So that orc spellcaster has had to carry that every single time. And the other characters do not let him live that one down. But the next spell he got was snuff, which puts out a fire. So that's my favorite memory from that one entirely. But I like the fact that you get to see Haven, a town, not a city. You get to see a town, bustling town.
Yeah.
You know that there's a horror area just above those walls, on the other side of those walls. So maybe that gets introduced to you as well as you're doing your setting description in your flavor text. They get to travel a little bit. They go to a Midland trading post, so a little tiny tavern in the middle of nowhere, like the Old West type stories you get in the Westerns.
Like a little outpost kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you get to go to the Bloodwood, which again, classic Earth Dawn things. So you get to see town, plains, little tiny one building stop, more plains, and then you get to go into the forest itself. So you've got these 3 different elements you get to bandy about with, and you get to do some care delving. So it really does touch on a whole bunch of major things, and there's enough combat to satisfy any of the D&D players who are trying Earth Dawn for the first time. So it's not leaving any of that out. I think it's got enough hooks to really appeal to D&D players if this is the first one they're going to play.
Yeah.
So
when I talk about this adventure, it is often in the context of the problems that it has in terms of the opposition and some of the combats that it has. But overall, it's a really good story, a really good sort of introductory. It's a little bit on rails in a sense. The troubleshooting sections especially are like, hey, here's how you can make sure that the group gets onto the next plot point in this.
Oh, they need to be captured. Make sure that happens.
Or something like that. There's one before they get to the care where it's like, well, if they decide not to do this, then they never get to the care. So try and make it a point that they do. There is a little bit of that goes on, but what other advice are you gonna have? And if they don't, well, then the adventure ends.
Yes.
They don't learn all of this other stuff that's going on, and maybe you could have that spin off into other consequences. But
yeah,
it's good. It's fun. I think now, especially where we've got the par length set that had come out, which obviously wasn't out when this was originally released, but where we've got that now, where we've got the Legends of Barsave Adventures, the par length adventures set, which we'll talk about in the future. This is a good thing to have as if you've got a game that's going to be based out of par length and Haven in the area. This isn't a bad adventure to include there. There is nothing in this specifically that ties it to any particular era.
No.
This doesn't have to happen before Prelude to War or the Second War or anything like that. So this could conceivably happen at any time.
Yeah. It's a timeless adventure. Really, for Earth Dawn's meta plot, this can take place whenever you want it to, as long as it's post-Scourge. Essentially. Yeah. That's the only time you have to be with is in the last 100 years.
That's sort of a given.
But other than that, no, this one I think stands the test of time. Great first effort. Little quibbles, but again, if you're a decent game master, this is not your first rodeo for game mastering Earth Dawn. You know how to fix some of this stuff. Pretty easy to tweak here and there. You're good to go. I think adaptable to 4th edition without a problem.
Yeah, if you're an experienced Earth Dawn GM, you should be able to handle the curveballs that this might throw at you. Its weakness as a first adventure is that it's got some really tough encounters that would not necessarily be obvious to an inexperienced Earth Dawn GM. One who is not familiar with the vagaries of the system might end up with fights that are, or encounters that are kind of outside of the group's capabilities and not recognizing when you need to perhaps pull your punches. Unless you want to run like a really dark, brutal, potentially fatal game, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's not really my thing, especially for an introductory game.
No, I'm trying to...
In one way, it is a good introductory adventure because it introduces or has a lot of iconic Earth Dawn stuff. Both Cadavermen, Shadowmance, Krillworms,
Jehuthra.
Horrors, the Bloodwood, all sorts of iconic Earth Dawn stuff is in there. But its weakness as an introductory adventure is that it's number-wise, there are some encounters that are not introductory.
Fair. So yeah, I wouldn't let first circle characters. I mean, I ran the first one I ran had first circle characters. I wouldn't do that again. I'd say second and third, yes. Go with second and third, fine.
Because then at that point, they'll have some durability. They'll be a little bit more survivable. They'll have some more tricks. Their step numbers will be a little bit higher. It'll be easier for them to handle some of the challenges. And if you do it and you sort of adapt it to a 4th edition, there's a lot more synergy between disciplines as well, where characters can help each other out, like distract and things like that will allow other characters to get bonuses that might make it a little bit easier for them to deal with some of the more difficult encounters.
Yeah, I would easily swap out the 4th edition Jehuthra for what's in the book. And if you're going to play 4th edition system, as you should, by the way, I think it'll all work out, really. I do. I think all the encounters will be just...
depending on the power level of the group, I don't remember what the challenge rating for a Jehuthra, default Jehuthra is in 4th.
No.
But you might want to end up scale back mask like small or one of the size modifiers to make it a smaller Jehuthra, or just modify the numbers yourself.
It's a journeyman 5th circle challenge rating.
Yeah. If you've got a group of 3rd circle characters, you probably just want to maybe throw one of those.
That makes sense. Like I said, that was the original thing I said. Scale it back to 1 Jehuthra, see how they do. Because it's the first thing that they're going to do. So, yeah. Any final thoughts, anything we've not covered for Mist of Betrayal?
No, I think we've covered everything pretty well, and we actually ended up going quite a bit longer on this than I thought we were going to.
We took an hour on it, which is it's 100 pages of stuff to get through. It's a massive adventure.
We did have like 20 minutes of talking about numerics and stats and stuff beforehand. Nope, that's it.
Fair. Until next time, folks, go toot your own horn. for your legend.
Good night, everybody.